how can we be sure that organic is safe? So here's the thing. There are 9 genetically modified food crops. Soy, corn, cotton, which is used for cottonseed oil, canola, sugar from sugar beets, which is most sugar, if it doesn't say pure cane sugar, between 50 and 60% is from sugar beets. Alfalfa, which is used as hay for animals, zucchini, yellow squash, not all of it, and papaya from Hawaii or China. Popcorn is not GMO, ever. So, the question is, if you're eating it, is it GMO? If it doesn't have any of the at-risk ingredients, it's not GMO. So all of the entire produce section, you only have zucchini, yellow squash, papaya, and corn. And edamame is there, and edamame, which is soy. Those are the only at-risks. If you're growing your own garden, you're only going to be looking at the corn, zucchini, and yellow squash, because you're not going to grow papaya, because it's the stuff in Hawaii, and you're not going to grow soy. So those are the ones. Now, if you buy something that's organic, that contains a corn derivative, it may have contamination. It won't be a huge amount, but it can be there. Organic does not allow the intentional contamination, but it also doesn't require any testing. The non-GMO project requires testing if there's corn or soy, etc. It still has a 0.9% threshold. So even if it says non-GMO project verified, it may end up being contaminated. So you have to decide whether you want to eliminate 100% of the risk, and it won't be 100% because still, you buy wheat and it might be transported in something that contains soy or corn before. So we say, buy organic, buy products that say non-GMO, buy products listed in our shopping guide, or avoid the at-risk ingredients. If you want to be more vigilant, you're welcome to be. Those we feel are reasonable instructions. Now, Roundup is also used as a ripening agent on wheat, barley, rye, lentils, potatoes, sugarcane, sweet potatoes, citrus, berries. 160 crops have high residue allowances because it's new use as a spray before harvest. So to avoid Roundup organic, you could look at the list of 160 and try and figure out what's not in that list that's never used. I haven't done that yet. But I say, if you can buy organic, do that. Likewise, you talked about growing your own, that would be another way.
Are you aware of the movement to purchase custom seed for operations?
I'm not aware of the movement. I am aware of a movement emerging in terms of heirloom seeds and making sure that people have access to the traditional non-GMO varieties. Yes?
You're talking about the BT and Roundup. GMOs are also taking genes from like a fish and putting it in the vegetables so they're weather tolerant.
So let me explain.
Is that a big issue too? Or
So what are the traits other than BT toxin and Roundup Ready or herbicide tolerant? Now, there's the fish tomato that's famous for all the artwork that it inspires. Pictures of tomato fish. It was never commercialized. The tomato that was put on the market in 1994 was not a fish tomato. It was a slow ripening tomato, and it was taken off the market because it was disgusting to the taste and whatnot by 1997. The potatoes were taken off the market. They were BT in 2001. The zucchini, yellow squash, and papaya are engineered not to have a certain plant virus. So it's a disease-resistant gene construct. But there are no other genetically engineered crops on the market other than those herbicide-tolerant, BT toxin, and disease-resistant. There are some that were bred with varieties that had higher nutrition or some altered nutrition, but it wasn't the genetic engineering that changed the nutrition. It just bred Roundup Ready with low linoleic acid. They call it GMO, even though they try to get more credit for it than they deserve. There's all sorts of promised traits. There's the golden rice disaster, which will hopefully never get on the market because it could really hurt people. And there's the concept that it will increase yield, where they actually GMOs don't increase yield. On average, they reduce yield. There's all sorts of promises that have never come true, because the whole basis of genetic engineering was based on the false idea that one gene produces one protein, which produces one trait, and it was just a matter of figuring out the genes, and then you were good. But now they realize it's far more complicated. There's networks and families and whatnot, and they haven't figured it out. And the drought resistance and salt resistance and yield, those all are complicated gene networks.
Of the 5 communities that you're going to target for this movement, I was surprised to hear that you didn't include gym goers and health nuts.
So it's interesting. Health conscious was in the list until the natural food industry tipped. And we helped do that. We helped engineer that. So the natural food goer, the healthy eater, was in that list. Now each of those other targets have the people that are healthy eaters versus not. So those that are more healthy, more conscious, that make decisions for food based on conceptual do's and don'ts rather than just taste and convenience, those will be the subgroup more than that. As far as gym goers go, I haven't had experience with the gym goer fitness group. I do know that there's a friend of mine who is one of the top strength trainers in the world, and I asked him, he wanted to interview me for his list. And he started out with a blockbuster. He said, the average, I had no idea, he said, the average baseball player is intolerant to 88 types of foods. And when they go off with GMOs for 3 weeks, it comes down to about 8. He had done that. I'm getting those numbers a little wrong, but it was like that. He had done that research, because he tells all of his clients to get off, to go all organic for 3 weeks, and he tests them on food intolerance before and after. So there are people who are champions in that space who will probably move the needle.
I heard a veteran addressing some kind of council, and he stated that Roundup is simply Agent Orange.
So Roundup is not Agent Orange. 2,4-D is the question is Roundup Agent Orange? People make that mistake. It's not. 2,4-D is half of the component of Agent Orange. And 2,4-D is an herbicide. And now up for approval is 2,4-D tolerant crops, which would mean we'd be spraying half of the component of Agent Orange all over the United States, increasing an estimate by 20-fold. It's very, very toxic. It's related to cancer and birth defects. It can also vaporize, move with the wind, and then redeposit on other crops and on playgrounds and on people. And we hope that it will not be approved. Yes?
I've been growing food for 27 years, and I got followers in Vegas that are starting to ask me questions like, well, what about Home Depot? Should I refuse to buy veggies that you're advising me to grow from Home Depot?
So in terms of where to buy your seeds?
No, where to buy plants. They have their nurseries, you know.
Oh, plants. There are a few ornamentals that are GMO, carnations grown in Australia. I haven't followed the ornamentals in the U.S. There may be some that have slipped in. They don't have to tell us.
If I was from Monsanto, you know, I would definitely be targeting places like nurseries at...
Yeah, but the thing is this,
you know,
in terms of edibles,
yeah.
It's just those 9 food crops. As far as we know, there's nothing else. There's trees out there that are genetically engineered, and they want to introduce huge numbers of eucalyptus and whatnot. Poplars, 1 million poplars in China. But in terms of the food, there's very few things to worry about. The zucchini, yellow squash, corn, those are the ones. And like I say, there's a handful of ornamentals, but I don't know the rest. Yes?
However, in British Columbia, where I'm from, Canada, we have a petition going right now to present to our provincial government before the 15th of May, because they are approving a modified apple that won't
Right,
turn
so
brown
to
anymore.
initiate things from Canada, and there's a petition going to try and stop the approval of the apple, which we call the Botox apple.
Certain type of apple.
Pardon?
certain type of apple.
Yeah, it's an apple that's designed not to brown. So it can be really rotten and whatnot, but you won't know it. It's the Botox apple. So it uses something called double-stranded RNA as a regulatory mechanism, which could be far more dangerous than anything we've seen. It might change the gene expression in many, many genes that we won't even know about. It could create new diseases. There's a lot of very serious concern about double-stranded RNA.
A lot of people are
Yes.
Trader Joe's claims that they don't use any GMOs, but they're not labeled.
Right, so Trader Joe's does not label its product as non-GMO, but it swears up and down that it's non-GMO. What do you think? Well, so it's like, first of all, I thank, they actually tell their suppliers to be non-GMO. I've seen high fructose corn syrup in some of their, this is only for those that say Trader Joe's, on their main brand. If it's something that doesn't say Trader Joe's, all bets are off.
They won't write it anywhere though.
But they won't write it. They have a description on their website of their policy. I tried to get them to tell me what's their standard, and they refused to tell me the standard. I called Cheerios and said, okay, you're non-GMO in your original brand. What's your standard? Why do you say it's non-GMO? Do you have a tolerance threshold? Do you test? Do you just do affidavits? They say, oh, we don't get that information. So this is one reason why the non-GMO project is so appreciated by consumers, because they publish their standard. It is very clear what they do. And Trader Joe's has so far refused. So my suggestion, if you shop at Trader Joe's, is speak to the highest level you can and say, thank you, but. Thank you so much for being non-GMO, but I really want to know in clear terms what your standard is. In fact, I would prefer to be non-GMO project verified. Can you please be sure to tell the head office, because I represent a lot of consumers. And then when they hear it a lot, their meetings will be a little bit more fiery. Yeah.
Should I worry about GMOs in xanthan gum, or citric acid, things like that?
So here's the concept. In our list on our shopping guide, we have some of these ingredients that no one would know is from corn unless they read it. But it's not always from corn. Xanthan gum can be from something else. So it's, it's like Clint Eastwood, feeling lucky. First of all, the more refined something is, the less risk it is. In this case, it's also a smaller ingredient in terms of overall weight. High fructose corn syrup, xanthan gum, they won't have Bt toxin. They won't have DNA. You can't get DNA transferred from high fructose corn syrup. There's no DNA, there's no protein. Now, what's the problem? Well, the process of genetic engineering can cause all sorts of changes, and so you may end up with, say, a fat-soluble toxin in corn oil or soybean oil, even though there's no DNA or protein, because you're changing the whole structure of it. But it'll be a lower risk. So there's no information that I have to be able to say you're safe or you're not safe. So it has to be your own decision, and part of that will determine your lifestyle and availability and your favorite foods. So some people will have a certain criteria for their home and a different criteria for the restaurant. Some people have a different, I think, raw corn on the cob, it's Monsanto's version, may be the most dangerous because it's got 2 Bt toxin genes and Roundup gene, and it's sprayed with Roundup, and it's live, and it's not processed, versus the high fructose corn syrup. So you have to make your own decision, and I think when you switch to healthier, less processed, organic foods, you're probably going to find brands and foods that you just absolutely love, and there'll be no sacrifice.
It seemed to me that given all of the incidence of chronic disease, switching to non-GMO is going to lower your prescription costs.
Oh yeah, in terms of the money side, we saw at the very beginning all those different symptoms. I mean, each one of those symptoms you can have a little, cash register sign, or ding, 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 all the money we spend on allergy stuff, and then the lifestyle things, and the energy, and how much more you can accomplish, which to some people translates into more money that they can earn. So, the money equation, if you look at the big picture, it becomes pretty obvious.
What's this diabetes?
Yeah, like diabetes, right. Yeah.
Your health.
I was wondering about wine.
Wine, there's a yeast that's genetically engineered that may be used by some wineries. The California Wine Institute is not in favor of it. I don't know anyone that uses it in particular, but organic wines certainly do not.
You have to buy organic to be sure.
Biodynamic definitely does not use it.
Or wine from Europe would work.
Wine from Europe, see, Europeans still use genetically modified enzymes, processing agents, and things in their foods. So that's still there, and it doesn't require labeling either.
It doesn't require
In fact, for very micro ingredients that are tiny like that, the non-GMO project doesn't look the other way as well. Organic doesn't. So the gold standard is to be organic and non-GMO project verified, because then it's been tested and lower, and it also has all the extra restrictions that organic has.
And you're not going to have GMO and you're not going to have these.
Right, so there's a lot of more test benefits for organic. Yes?
Logically, if corporations have been, they're only lately have been to purchase all of these seeds, logically wouldn't we conclude that plant the seeds for planting genetically modified crops? Are you saying that?
No, see, Monsanto bought Seminis, which is the question is, Monsanto is like the largest seed producer, so can we assume that everything that Monsanto sells, or a lot of it, is genetically engineered secretly? No, I would not. I would say that's not true. Here's why. First of all, there are some countries that do require registration of GMOs, and if they made a GMO and didn't tell them, they'd be in big trouble. Second, they sell GMOs at a premium, so they brag and boast that, oh, this is Roundup Ready, oh, this is a BT toxin, oh, this will resist whatever. So if they're going to make a GMO, they want to make extra money from it, and then they have farmers sign contracts that they won't replant it. So there's a whole marketing strategy to bring them more money and more control whenever they genetically engineer something. And so it would be extremely unlikely if they're secretly genetically engineering stuff. What's less unlikely is in some country like China, they may have genetically engineered stuff and has sent it to the US, and they don't have to tell anyone that it's genetically engineered in the United States if they're just exporting it to here. So that's a possibility. So we may have GMOs there. Tobacco was genetically engineered to have higher levels of nicotine to get people more addicted, grown illegally in Brazil, smuggled in the United States, and thrown into 1 cigarette per pack in the United States. So that was another example of an illegal, addictive GMO.
I want to go off what you're saying. There's a lot of cross-contamination possibilities, and a lot of the seeds that people think are heirloom, they could have been, pollinated accidentally by something was contaminated. So, and a lot of farmers, like you said, they don't do testing.
So the question is about the purity of seeds and the possibility of contamination. So remember, for the commercialized GM seeds, there's only 9. So if you buy a potato or a banana, those don't have seeds. Well, these make a lot of examples. If you're buying something that is other than those 9, then it's not going to be GMO. However, I have to be clear. There is a possibility of contamination from a field trial. I talked about 9 commercialized food crops. Commercialization comes after field trials. And the USDA has authorized probably 100,000 field trials by now. And the field trials have been for wheat and been for 100 to 200 different species. And wheat contaminated a wheat field in Oregon, and rice contaminated long grain rice in the South. And so even though it was never commercialized, it did cause contamination. From a purchasing perspective, from being a consumer, I would say ignore it. It'll drive you crazy, and if there's levels of contamination, it'll be minute, far less than an organic, non-GMO corn chip. Because the amount of contamination will be extremely tiny. So if we live our lives based on that fear, then we're bringing the toxin of fear into our lives too. So like I also say, if you accidentally eat a GMO or if you have to eat a GMO, don't worry about it. Because worrying is toxic, and the GMO is toxic, and now you have 2 toxins.
Right.
So just eat and do what you can. Yeah.
Is it true with seeds that are not GMO, you can replant?
So here's the deal with replanting. The question is, there's something called terminator technology, which has not been commercialized yet. It is illegal from the international government perspective, and that's where you grow sterile seeds. So what the biotech industry does is they simply have farmers sign contracts, and then they'll threaten to sue or threaten, and it causes a lot of heartache and horrible goings on in the farm sector. Hybrids, which is one way to, hybrids are not genetically engineered per se. They're crosses, and hybrids don't necessarily reproduce according to the same characteristics as their seed. So if you buy hybrid corn, you buy it every year anyway, even if it's non-GMO.
I have been recently shopping at Mexican markets, produce coming from Mexico, like pineapple and yucca root, for my own personal needs of having these type of foods. What do you know about their standards?
So the nine we're talking about are around the world. So yucca is not on that list. Papaya's on the list, but they don't actually grow GM papaya in Mexico. Pineapple, there's a genetically modified papaya that Dole has developed, but they haven't commercialized it yet. So virtually everything in the fruits and vegetable category is somewhere in the pipeline. Someone's made it, but if it's not on that list, it's non-GMO today. The Coca-Cola in Mexico is with cane sugar, not hybrid cane.
Wow.
They just changed it?
Yeah, they just changed to allow.
But they also disallowed GM corn in Mexico, of course, today.
It's startling, I can't say impressive, really startling medical statistics up there about before and afters. So kind of a two-part question. So the first part of my question is, knowing what you know for as many years as you've done this research and speaking and discovery, and also knowing what you know in terms of how powerful this empire is in the world, in which Monsanto is a huge player. I think it's one thing, it's beautiful to be able to educate people so we can eat better and we can raise our children healthier. But I guess my two-part question to you is, that's doable, but how doable do you really feel it is to go after the empire? I mean, this is such a multi-dimensional thing that garners so much money. And I guess and the second part of the question is, have you read Naomi Klein's Shock Doctrine? And isn't this just part of it?
So, I haven't read it, but I've heard her speak about it.
Yeah.
So in terms of the empire, I had this discussion with my very good friend Frances Moreland Pay, who wrote Diet for Small Planet, and she talks about rekindling democracy. And I think that we have now, we're suffering from a corporatocracy. We have a situation where corporate control in America is the de facto rule, and it's often hidden, but you just have to move a little leaves here and there, and all of a sudden it's all corporations. And it's pretty blatant. And so you end up with a skewed set of products within, skewed towards the biotech side, skewed towards the pharmaceutical side, skewed towards the energy sector, skewed towards basically all of the big businesses regulate themselves. And a lot of the other problems, in order to fix, require policy change. So that's one of the advantages of the GMO issue, is you can completely solve it even if you have a pro-GM government by knocking it out of the marketplace. So that's one of the advantages of GMO. And when I look at, the word triage. Triage is what they did in medical units in the war. These people brought to the emergency room will live no matter what. These people will die no matter what. And the middle group is will live if you put attention on them, and that's the group you focus on. So when I look at the world, I say, what's the bleeding patient? And the bleeding patient to me, right now, one of the biggest looming large is the GMO issue. Because it will define nature or not. We're at the pivotal point. And if it's causing these diseases, and I think it is promoting the diseases we just saw, then it's causing huge death and disease, and also brain fog, and ADD, and difficulty functioning, and it's like pretty pretty leveraged critical. And so I personally choose not to focus on systemic change because I have a bleeding patient. I have to stop the bleeding of this patient. We have to stop GMOs now. And other people are also focusing on the democracy piece and the systemic change and Citizens United and things like that. So, and I'm grateful that there's a lot of other groups doing that. But to me, we have a window of about a year or two where we can take this completely down in the food and about 5 years in the feed. And we've never had that opportunity before. So that's just my long-winded answer to that. You had your even very patient, or not?
So those last few questions were really relevant to what I wanted to ask. Okay. So the way I see it, knowledge is how you fight ignorance, of course. But how do you get through to people? Like, I talk, I face fluid people, and you've been doing this, 19 years? I talk to a lot of people, my coworkers, my friends on Facebook, everybody I know, and I just get the same thing that I think is kind of influenced by a whole corporate idea of how you're supposed to think. How do you get past that? And
all right.
If there is a 5-year window, shouldn't that be something that we need to focus on getting done quick?
Yes, we are. And I used to say we need about 5% of the U.S. population avoiding GM ingredients to create a tipping point. Because you don't have to move the masses, you just have to move enough to demonstrate a drop in market share to the food companies. Now it's easier, you just have to move sales of grape nuts in Walmart. It's really, and 39% of Americans say they avoid or reduce GMOs, up from 15% in 2007. I don't think there's actually that many people who do what they say, the 39%. But we have enough energy right now. So first of all, in terms of a global strategy or a national strategy, I don't need to convince all of your friends. I just need to convince the receptive ones. And there's enough receptive people. I mean, 53% of Americans say they would avoid GMOs if labeled. That means most of Americans are on our side who have at least an intuitive sense that it's not a good idea to mix and match genes from different species, bacteria and viruses in our food. So you just tell them, and most of them want to know what you're going to say, and then you can change, and then you think, oh great, what do I eat? Now, there's a much smaller percentage who are like, it's going to feed the world, it's good, and I'm sure the government's doing a good job. And it's like, fine, you can decide whether you want to put your energy and attention on trying to convince that person. From a strategy standpoint, I'll go somewhere else. From a strategy standpoint, I don't have to go into the Biotech Industry Organization annual meeting and try and convince anyone. It's a huge waste of time, and I'll be a target, it'll be dangerous. So I would say, and the other thing is this. Some people ask her, how do I convince my uncle, my friend, my brother, my son? I say, don't. Let me do it. Because you're discounting as a friend or as a family member. You're just, oh, it's you again, talking about the same thing. Show them the book, or show them the movie.
I pull it up all the time, and I'm telling people just don't. They have a DGA, but don't give up that word. They don't care. They do not care.
And the thing is this.
It's still like 50% of the country.
I don't think it's 50%, but I'll tell you this. That's one reason why we pick the most receptive demographics. Because the thing is, a mom may say, yeah, I'm going to die anyway, but for my son, for my dog, for my cat. And then there's the people who are sick and they're in pain. And maybe they're facing a life-threatening situation. They care. And if their pastor or rabbi or imam tells them, don't eat it, they may care. So that's, from a strategic standpoint, you don't have to convince everyone. And we have different ways to convince different people. So stay in touch with us and see what new information, new tools we come out with. When you roll that series of mini documentaries of moms that we're going to be producing, and you roll that against the moms, see if that will knock down the boundaries. The other thing is this, and this is for all the activists in the room. I heard you frustrated. I heard it's like you're going against the wall, and you want to change them, and you want to change them. That's not a sustainable attitude. And that is a crash and burn attitude. You will not you would not last 19 years doing that. No, no, it's like, it's a different attitude. It's not just patience. It's like, it's kind of like, you do what your assignment is. You do what you feel like you know what to do. It's like, and you're okay with not having to convince everyone. If you put that rope around it and say, this is what I need to do, I need to convince every one of my friends, you're setting yourself up for frustration and failure, and also rejection by them. Because you want them to love you, you want to love them. That's very important. And you don't want to withhold that. And so I would say just realize that this is actually happening. We're actually doing this. And if you sit back from that energy and you look at it from a more like, what's the guidance here? You have a lot of information and passion. So don't give that up. Just figure out where you can pounce and have the greatest power. And it could be a blog. And it could be a vlog, a video blog. And it could be giving speeches. And it could be writing, and it could be getting together with the Tipping Point Network group and inspiring everyone else of the converts to be more powerful. So you have a lot of different channels on your television to click through and find out what is your channel. And you've just been focusing on one and it isn't answering. So try others.
Can I tell you what works for me?
What works for you?
Because I know you can't talk at people. They're not listening. They don't care.
They'll say, here she comes, get away. She's going to talk about you.
Right. What I did, I have over 100 Facebook friends. And I friended your organization. I friended the organic consumer. And so it comes through the news feed. So everybody...
So let me repeat that so that the camera hears it. Right. So if you...
I also will share articles, and because it comes on the news feed. So everybody that's your friend on Facebook, they're going to be seeing this stuff. And in the beginning, I wasn't getting any likes. I wasn't getting any comments. Now I'm starting to get likes and comments because they're starting to read it, and I haven't said a word to them.
So using social media, and I know you're doing that as well, but using social media is extremely powerful. Reposting and also friending the Institute for Responsible Technology, because we're going to send you stuff so that your friends will be able to see it and all that. And the other thing is this, it's changing now. You know, when I started back in '96 and before, it took a long time to change someone's diet, to even describe what GMO was. Now it's in the air. It's totally in the air. So it's all going to change. They're going to say, you're right. And you're going to want to hear that for like 10 minutes, and that's all they're going to say.
You're right. It's better if they read something you wrote.
I know. All right, you guys can.
It is indeed the reason why you want to talk to the people that you're talking to. If your point is to get them to do what you want them to do, that's control, and nobody wants to be controlled. That's the whole point of what we're doing is we don't want the genetic modification because it's control of a lot of the different things that we eat. And so if your whole point is that you want people to change, if you just barely started doing it, it's going to take some time because you actually have to change yourself. And then people see that change in you and they want to know what are you doing different. And then don't be greedy with the things that you come across. Share the recipes. Share the food that you eat. Share that while they're watching a video by Dr. Smith, have them eat an organic meal that you prepared for them and that you're willing to share. This is how I did it. This is how much I spent, and you should do it too because it wasn't that good. And they follow in line with you, but if you don't have solutions for them, you're turning them away, or you're making them feel negative about something that's beautiful and positive that anybody can benefit and should benefit from, but they need the tool from you as their friend. Be their friend.
Right. And
Not just to get them to do that, but because it's benefiting you.
Like that's what I've been doing that. I've been working on that. That's one thing I didn't realize over time.
Yeah, it's better not to try to change somebody, but to get them educated. Post the article.
You know what's happening is a real nice discussion here. I would like to recommend, somebody here part of the Tipping Point Network? Yeah, so we should probably set up a meeting. So who runs the Tipping Point Network here? All right, well, maybe we can organize to send out to the list to sign up tonight, and have a meeting so that, because what happens is this, and we're going to wrap up here because it's time to sign books and